Welcome everyone to episode 128 of the Reds Unrestricted podcast. I'm your host, David Comerford, and I'm joined by Farrell Keeling to dissect Liverpool's 3-2 win over Nottingham Forest. So we missed the game against Leeds on Monday. Apologies for that, but we're back for another game with plenty of goals in it. This time split a little bit nervously as opposed to the emphatic victory we saw at Ellen Road, but Liverpool in the end prevailing against Nottingham Forest on Saturday. We saw Diogo Jota open the scoring for Liverpool just after half time. That was cancelled out by the former Liverpool player, Neco Williams. Jota then scores again, only for Morgan Gibbs-White to equalise for a second time. But then at last, Mohamed Salah scores what proves to be the winner. A few nervy moments afterwards, but Liverpool able to hold on and make it back-to-back victories and move up to 7th in the table. So 0-0 at half time, and then all 5 goals coming within what I think was 25 second half minutes. So, Farrell, everybody knows the drill by now. It's 3-word match reviews, first of all, and your assessment of that Liverpool performance.
Yeah, my 3-word match review would be much needed grit. I just thought it's the kind of game. I mean, we saw it earlier in the season. We ended up losing 1-0 at Forest. You know, I think there were moments when you kind of look at Liverpool teams of old, you struggle through, you break them down. And what we saw today really is you know, what's been missing most of the season. You know, I think, I don't know if I'm mistaken, thinking all 3 goals kind of resulted from set pieces.
They did.
You know, how much can we say that we've relied on that as a bona fide threat from Liverpool's perspective this season? We haven't really. Part of that has been, you know, the spotlight has been on Trent in terms of his defensive flaws, and obviously I think his confidence has taken hit, how involved he is in sort of the creative side of the game, build-up play and that kind of thing. You know, the tweak has done wonders for it. It very much looks like Trent's got his confidence back, and you know, we're getting the best out of his abilities. And I just think it's the kind of performance. And plenty have gone online and said, "Oh, Liverpool were a bit sort of weak in moments," and you know, you play that in other games. But you know, really, I think we've seen more from Liverpool in that game than we've seen for much of the season. So, in my eyes, I think that's a good win for us.
I agree, and I'm going to touch on something that you mentioned there, really, and it's the set pieces. And my 3-word match review is set piece duel, because that's what it was. All 3 Liverpool goals coming from set pieces. The first one for Jota from a corner. Then it was the second one. Was it a free kick from Robertson, also to Jota, and then another free kick, I believe, to Salah for the third goal. And then Forest as well at the other end. Both goals coming from throw-ins. Yeah. So basically every single goal, which I can't really remember a game with 5 goals and all come from set pieces, but so that was the story of it, really. It was a set-piece battle. Liverpool won it in the end. And I did some digging after the game and found that we had 13 shots from set pieces in that match, out of 18 total. So that's 5 from open play and 13 from set pieces. And that is unsurprisingly the highest Liverpool have had in any single game this season. The previous high was 11 against Brentford. And I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know this for a fact, but it's hard to imagine many Premier League games where our teams had more set-piece attempts than that. The deliveries from Trent and Robertson all day were excellent, and we could have scored 5 or 6 from set-pieces. I mean, there was a chance where Van Dijk had one, tipped over the bar by Navas, and also Gakpo saw an effort cleared off the line by Neco Williams as well. So in a way, you can look at it in 2 aspects. Liverpool didn't create much from open play in this match, but it's perfectly fine to create from set pieces. That's, you know, as we saw today, you're going to get loads of those, and you need to be able to beat teams in multiple ways. You know, if you can't just carve them open in open play, because Forest weirdly were very organised in open play, but as soon as there was a set piece, they were in complete and utter disarray, and Liverpool capitalised on that in the end. And I suppose you could make a similar case for Liverpool's defending at the other end. I mean, open play, Forest had nothing. The first half, they had 14% possession, 1 shot completed. Oh, you know, barely any passes because they were just playing it long. It was 50% passing accuracy from Forest in the first half. Second half, they obviously come into it, but you know, it's the set pieces for them that are the avenue. Like, they're not breaking Liverpool down in open play themselves, but that it was just chaotic defending, really. From it was like watching Arsenal against Rory Delap back in the day, to be fair. So thankful to get out of it alive in that sense. It was a very strange game in the sense that there was this sort of set piece battle taking place where all teams were getting their chances, and other than that, it was more Liverpool. It was what you'd expect, aside from the set pieces where Liverpool maybe struggled to break down a deep, well-organised defence. And Forest don't really have much, and then the set pieces come and they're just chaos. So that's how I saw it. Let's get on to some players. And there's only one place to start. The man who scored 2 goals today, 4 goals in 2 games, Diogo Jota. I mean, what a turnaround that is, Farrell, after what I think off the top of my head was 372 days without a goal in any competition for Liverpool.
A long time, a year without scoring, and he goes on sort of and plays such a pivotal role in our last 2 games. You'd have to say, given the 2 goals that he did score were quite sort of wildly different in terms of what was required. The first one, typical kind of poacher's finish, which again is probably one of the most sort of underrated finishes in football. And then sort of the technique he has with the second to pull that off. It's, I don't want to be, it's very easy to kind of get in minds of, Diogo Jota's back, but it feels like he's back, doesn't it? It feels like we've gone through this period where his confidence had really sort of taken a massive hit, after sort of repeated injuries. And he's phenomenal. You can't really count Diogo Jota out. I remember very, very recently, there being calls about, should we be looking to sell him? Newcastle was sniffing about reports of 40, 50, 60 million pounds. Should Liverpool sell him to fund their trans? Absolutely insane calls. I think there's clear value in sticking with him and sticking with, a lot of the players of his sort of age range. I think Klopp came out the other day and sort of, people have been questioning why Darwin Núñez hasn't been starting yet. And I think he sort of he alluded to his English still being, how many times have people sort of commentators ruled out certain players in the Liverpool squad? You cannot rule out the likes of Jota and Darwin Núñez. I'm very impressed. I'm quite happy to see him sort of back in the goals, because it was getting to that point, I think, when everyone was starting to say, look, it's been a year now, injuries or not. It's it's not what you expect of a Liverpool striker, not what you expect of a Liverpool forward in a Jurgen Klopp team. Yes, I couldn't be more delighted for him.
Yeah, I do love Jota, and in fairness, I agree that he did desperately need a goal, but I was also never sort of worried in terms of the ramifications in terms of long term, because he was still contributing in other ways. I think he had more assists, or maybe the second most assists of any player during that kind of barren run. So that's why Klopp was still showing faith in him. And I never thought that it was we saw last season the height he hit. I think he got over 20 goals last season. And that player was always going to be there. You look at the age that he is, and it was just a case of kind of getting that confidence back. And he did against Leeds. Misses a sitter in the first half of this game, incidentally, and you're worried that is Leeds going to be a bit of a flash in the pan in that sense. But no, gets that poacher's goal, like you say. And the touch and finish for the second one is sort of pure technique and pure instinct. It was absolutely brilliant, that. And it reminds me of what Jota himself said after the game against Leeds. He mentioned an analogy that Cristiano Ronaldo used. Obviously, probably one of his idols, being Portuguese. I think it was in 2010, and Ronaldo says, sometimes goals are like ketchup. You try so hard to get it to come out, and then all of a sudden they all come out at once. And that's kind of what's happened, really. Like you say, no goals in over a year, and now 4 in the space of 2 matches. We saw last season Sadio Mane had his longest ever goal drought in a Liverpool shirt. He then is transferred. He gets a goal against Chelsea, carries that into AFCON, comes back, and he's prolific for the remainder of the season. Goals, it's really simple in a way. You just need that goal, and then you get the boost. Your confidence comes back, and your goal scoring instincts come back as well. And it reminds me actually of Eden Hazard too. The season where he basically went a year without a goal. he scores, he gets a few, scores one at Anfield actually, as he has a sort of late season flurry, carries it into the following season where he helps Chelsea win the Premier League. So hopefully Jota can not only keep this up for the rest of this year, but then sort of carry that good feel and have a full pre-season, which he didn't really get last year. And then next season he can be sort of back to his best, fully fledged. Another player that I think was probably one of Liverpool's best today, a man of the match contender certainly, and someone who we have to talk about is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Once again, Farrell thriving in his new role that Klopp's given him.
Yeah, no, I mean, 4 assists in his last 3 games. I remember writing about him the other day, and I think so. His first 3 assists came in the sort of first half of the season, and now he's got 4 in his last 3 games. So if you ever needed evidence that that tactical tweak from Klopp is paying dividends, there it is in black and white. It's working. I mean, the most interesting thing for me is that I think a lot of commentators seem to confuse this idea of Trent needs to play in midfield without understanding, well, actually he's thriving by inverting and running into midfield from his own half when we're in possession. It's not because he's starting from midfield. And that's the crucial distinction. Everyone says, oh, he needs to be in midfield. It's midfield. You get the likes of Lineker and all that saying, oh, I always said we need to start. But he's not starting in midfield.
Yeah.
He's walking, he's moving into midfield. And the key thing for Trent, as has been the case, when he was having his most successful sort of years under Klopp, was that he had space to run into, the pitch all ahead of him, he could play the pass. We've just merely directed it now in a different direction. It's this was always going to be key for Liverpool, because the minute that we weren't making the most of his sort of creative ability, Liverpool were always going to suffer massively. And don't get me wrong, Robertson's fantastic, and I think he's got a reasonably good supply of assists this season. I think it's in the 7 or 8 range.
Robertson's on 10 now, yeah.
Is it 10? I thought it was
10,
goal
yeah.
contributions. So 10. Well, there you go. Even better. But I think we'd be foolish to not acknowledge that Trent is, of course, our most creative force. That's certainly no slight on Andy Robertson.
Yeah.
And again, with set pieces, we saw this again with the first goal with the corner. I know it was from a sort of Fabinho sort of flick on, but it just created absolute sort of havoc in the Forest box. And I think that's such a key part of Liverpool getting through these kind of games where we know that they're going to sit back, they're going to load the box, thinking you can't just traditionally open up like they're a better side, playing more open football and get them on the counter-attack. You need to be a bit more, just a bit more sort of intuitive and creative. And so I'm delighted to see that. I think it's extremely positive. And as you say, we're seeing Jota get back in the goals. Well, we should equally be celebrating Trent getting back in the assists and getting his mojo back, heading into the next season. That's a fantastic sign, regardless of whether Liverpool get Champions League football or not. That's exactly the kind of situation you want heading into the next campaign.
Yeah, he Klopp said something before the game which stuck with me along those lines. He said, basically, we don't know what's going to come of this season, and we'll get onto that in a second. But while we have these games, he said something along the lines of, I'm aware that there are other seasons too. It's not all about this season. So what can I sort of salvage from this year? What can I learn from this kind of stretch of games at the end of the season that I can use next year? And it's still early days, but everything we've seen so far from this experiment suggests that it's going to be good for Liverpool and good for Trent. And obviously those two things are very much tied together because, like you say, he is so important to this team. So I'm really sort of excited about that in terms of a template going forward. And, often we talk about how when the pressure comes off a team, they can experiment and maybe gain something from that. And sometimes it doesn't really come to fruition, but we're seeing that very much happen here with Trent. It is really paying off. And ran the show, especially in the first half today. He was the best player on the pitch for Liverpool. And he's producing those kind of highlight reel passes again. And it was sort of, he's had so many flashes this season, and not all of them have led to assists. But now, after sort of a really difficult campaign, he's becoming a joy to watch again. And I think that stems from the fact that he's rediscovered his own sort of joy when he's got the ball at his feet. And that does sound maybe a little bit kind of, flowery or cliched or whatever you want to call it, but it matters. And I think we're certainly seeing that turnaround from Trent. Anybody else to mention, Farrell, who kind of stood out to you today?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, again, if you kind of look at the goals that have been scored, Nico Williams, it's a bit of bad luck, the deflection, former Liverpool player, it was so endemic of this season, and you sort of thought when that goal went in, you were like, oh god, it's not going to be one of those games, is it? And then we scored again, and then Gibbs White with that unbelievable effort, and I think Taiwo Awoniyi came close with an overhead kick as well. So that game we could have really ended up with a share of spoils there had they had just a little bit more luck. So I don't think the back line was atrocious. I think, yes, we had some issues with set pieces, but I remember several sort of key contributions from Van Dijk in particular. I think there's a moment in the second half where Trent gifts the ball away into the middle of the park. I'm not quite sure what happens. Awful ball. And then Nottingham Forest on the counter. And then I think Van Dijk sort of absolutely punts it up the pitch. I think the back line was quite solid. I think we do have to give them some credit today. And if I may add another, I thought I was quietly impressed with Luis Diaz. His cameo. I thought he was absolute terror on the left flank again, which is exactly what we want to be seeing heading into the remainder of the season.
Yeah, that's a great one to mention actually, because he only really had sort of 2 runs, but one of them he wins a free kick, and that's exactly what you want in this scenario. And if you're not going to win a free kick, get the ball up the pitch, and that's exactly what he did with the other. And I suppose just really exciting to see him looking like so sharp, and that kind of close control, that dribbling, just being there already is really exciting. And not much playing time for him today. West Ham in midweek, Spurs next weekend. I think it's still going to be a couple more games where we see him start, but hopefully he can sort of be kind of ramping up to kind of 30-minute sub appearances soon, and starting to get back amongst the goals and the assists, certainly. So Diaz is a good shout. I think he only played an hour today. I thought Fabinho had a good game. I'm not just saying that because he got the sort of assist for the goal with that glancing header, but even beyond that, there's a couple of vintage Fabinho moments in there where he breaks up an attack and tests Liverpool on the front foot. We won't talk about the shot that he put over the extended Anfield Road, but I thought generally it was much more like it from him. And obviously coming off with probably an eye on West Ham, because there isn't really, with Bajcetic injured, there isn't really another option in that number 6 role. But yeah, credit to him today, because he's had a lot of deserved stick this season, but praise players when they deserve it too. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of the individual performances then. Just a reminder, if you're listening to this on audio, please do give us a 5-star review on Spotify. We've had another one since our last episode, so we're really grateful for that. And also you can follow the podcast, press the notification button too, so it appears in your feed and you get a message every time we post a new episode. And a reminder too that you can email us at redzonerestrictedpodcast@gmail.com, and that could be with sort of any feedback about the podcast, any questions you have that you want us to answer on or off air. So yeah, just a couple of reminders about those. Okay, so we'll spend the last few minutes of the podcast looking ahead really to the rest of the season, and we've seen Liverpool pick up 7 points from their last 3 now, after one from their previous 3 before that. So the mood's obviously changing a little bit. I'll pull the table up because it looks better than it did, certainly, but still, not great. Liverpool remain 7th. I think Aston Villa scored a late equaliser against Brentford today, which propped them back up above Liverpool, but they do have a game in hand. So it's a bit complicated because it's sort of everyone is on a different amount of games between 30 and 32. But the thing that everyone's looking at, obviously, is the top 4. Liverpool 6 points off Newcastle, but Newcastle do have a game in hand on the Reds, which happens to be against Tottenham, who are obviously another team who are in that equation, and that is tomorrow. So Farrell, it's obviously a little bit hard to assess the full landscape. We're recording obviously Saturday evening. We don't know what's happened yet in that one. That's a pretty significant game in the top 4 picture. What's your kind of just general outlook though on the end of the season? Have you sort of kind of put expectations and put the table to one side and just thinking, let's just get as many victories as we can together? let's try and build some momentum and see where it leaves us? Or are you very much kind of someone who's looking at the table after every game thinking, can we do this?
I do tend to look at the table a lot. I think recently less so. I've come accustomed to the fact, or the likely eventuality, that Liverpool probably won't get Champions League football this year. So I think the table's almost irrelevant. It's just more about game by game, getting the wins. I think my colleague and editor wrote a piece, and I think he's convinced that Liverpool will get top four, provided we have an absolute perfect finish to the season. So what will now be 7 wins from 7 following the Nottingham Forest game. It's possible. The thing that stands out to me, I think, if you look at the run-in immediately, you've mentioned Tottenham, but look at the games that follow. Everton, Southampton. We're talking relegation battlers here. Those are going to be really tough games for Newcastle. You're going to be fighting two sides that are going to be absolutely going full pelt to stay in the English top flight. I think Liverpool's next games, we've got obviously Tottenham coming up, but we're playing them at home, which I think is absolutely critical because our home form's been phenomenal. Home form is top 4 without question. Yeah. West Ham away,
tough one.
It's a tough one, but they're not as in a desperate situation. And also I think there's the factor that you have to consider European football. I think they're still going strong in the Europa League. So, is that going to be a factor? Probably. And then you look at the immediate sort of 2 fixtures after that: home against Fulham, home against Brentford. We're talking about 2 clubs that are safely mid-table. It's not a nothing game to them, but they're not fighting for survival here. Yeah. So there's going to be less of an intensity compared to sort of other games. I'm just loading up Newcastle's other fixtures again. They've got to host Arsenal. Depending on how the title race is going, obviously it's a bit tight now following their draw with Southampton. I don't want to get bogged down in ifs, buts, and maybes. But the picture, I think, being objective here, we can say Newcastle aren't going to have a clear run at Champions League football. I think this would start to get a bit tasty come early May. With 6 points now, they've got a game in hand. Does that put pressure on them? Especially you look at the fixtures they've got. I think it does. Would I rather be in Newcastle's position? Probably, yeah. Given their given their defensive record, but I don't know how are you feeling about it?
Well, I think that you mentioned 7 games to go now. We're probably, if not gonna have to win all 7, it'll be 6 and a draw, you'd say. Do I think this team can do that? Based on the squad that they have, yes. Based on the way they played this season, no. I think, if they win the next 2, if they go to West Ham, a team they lost to last season, a team who are obviously in that relegation battle, and they prove after Leeds that they can get these results away from home now against those struggling teams where they've been so complacent and so poor this season, and then beat Tottenham, who are obviously a team in and around them in the table, then do you know what? I start to think we can do something. Obviously, you need Newcastle to stutter a bit. That could happen still. You'd have to say they've shouldered the pressure very well up to this point. But will there be kind of a wobble now? Look, I think it's possible, but I'm still of the mindset, and I was of the mindset today of being sort of like, let's just try and let's focus on ourselves completely. Let's, like I said, let's make sure we're building good habits for next season. We're finding kind of the formula for next season, and just trying to sort of salvage our own kind of professional dignity almost out of what's been a really poor season overall. And then we'll see where we end up. It certainly looks promising right now in terms of what Liverpool can do in and of themselves, but the bar for them is very high, and Newcastle can probably afford to make a couple of mistakes as well within that. So you need things to you need everything to really fall your way. But it looked like it was going to be a case of giving up on it, but it's we're talking about it, so so that tells you really. So yeah, our next game will be against West Ham on Wednesday night. West Ham, a team who could conceivably be playing in the Europa League and Championship next season, which should be a quite incredible turn of events. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Another key test of Liverpool's credentials for this late season push, like I say. In the meantime, before our next episode, if you're watching us on YouTube, where we upload video versions of all our podcasts, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment as well if you enjoyed it. And yeah, like I say, we'll be back after the game against West Ham in midweek to give our reaction, and then another big one against Tottenham the following weekend. But until then, take care.